Hello everyone, it's me again. I'm sorry that it's been so long since the last video, but rest assured knowing that the silence on our end wasn't due to inactivity. Contrarily, it was due to how busy development has been over the last months. We're looking to start doing some testing, but not necessarily how you might expect. It's no bluff that new code has been written for all aspects of the game, not just ones at the top level, so we need to make sure even the most basic features are operational. But with that being said, things are looking quite good and the code base is flexible should any issues arise. So for this video, I'd like to talk about the endgame as a whole and how the PvP ties in. At the release of Burning Crusade, you had the first season arena gear, the first set of honor rewards, and up to and including tier 5. Now, it was a little over 4 months after the fact that tier 6 was introduced, and although we intend to have those raids developed at the time of release, we want to maintain a similar timetable. I've mentioned that attunements and all that goes with them will be kept, and that's quite a lengthy journey that guilds have to go through together. But as the server gets older, we want that experience to remain, even for new guilds. And part of maintaining that experience goes hand in hand with the PvP system, since the rewards can be quite good. When we consider how much time goes into reaching and clearing the quests, attunements, heroics, tier 4, tier 5, then tier 6, we expect that the majority of raiders won't get past tier 5, at least not for a significant amount of time. So in that regard, let me talk a little bit about the PvP. Now, in Burning Crusade, you farm honor for the basic rewards, and then play arena to earn the gear. It's a good system that we've implemented as it was, but at the end of the first season, we might not move on to the next set of rewards. We want to keep an eye on the overall progression and gear of the server as a whole. It's possible that we'll move on to the next set of gear sooner than we thought, but there's a real possibility that only a few guilds get past tier 5 after several seasons. So we'll play it by ear, but for me, I think the game is at its best when it's rewarding to do both PvP and PvE instead of choosing one over the other. Now, for the most part, implementing the PvP is pretty straightforward, so even though I actually enjoy PvP more than PvE, there's only really so much I can say about it. I'd like to expand a little more on what I spoke about in my previous video. One of the remarks I read often was people were skeptical that our system could do more than just the basics that the video covered. I'd have to say that my favorite fight in the Burning Crusade is Kael'thas from the Eye, but first let me start off a little bit smaller by going over the 5-man version in Magister's Terrace. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by explaining how the phoenixes work, where they leave an egg behind after death, which then has to be killed before it hatches. Right now I have the death event selected, but you don't actually kill the phoenixes in this fight, they solely kill themselves with their AoE. Now this here is a passive spell they put on themselves, which periodically triggers the AoE damage, but this spell doesn't actually deal any self-damage like the Warlock's Immolation would. So what I've done is set up another event where when this triggered spell is casted, I instruct the creature to inflict 5% of its health as damage at itself. Now as for the egg, it's quite simple. We don't ever allow it to enter combat, that way we have a consistent timer that starts from when it spawns. I'll just go ahead and make a slight tweak here, make it look a little better. And I may as well clean this up here. This doesn't really do anything since it's not repeatable. Then when that timer expires, it dies and summons another phoenix. So now we'll move on to the boss himself, and of course the most notable aspect of the fight is his gravity lapse ability that starts at 50% HP. So let me go ahead and damage him a bit. And I'll just go ahead and let these little balls follow me around and tab back into the editor. So about a second after he reaches 50% HP, he'll start the ability that knocks everyone up in the air. There's actually dozens of spells called Gravity Lapse that play a role here or in the eye, but we're only interested in the one that plays a script effect and also has a cast time. So these several commands here are what get executed onto each player the spell hits. We remove any old versions of the spells we're about to cast at them, then we cast the new ones. This one doesn't actually do anything, it's just a visual. The real bread and butter is the spell that knocks you up in the air, and then the follow-up debuff that lets you fly.
Upside down.
And the reason we need the original spell to do this is that it determines who the commands are called onto. Every command has a source and a target, and as it happens, this spell targets any and every alive player. And finally, there's a little event that plays when the boss dies. He activates a couple of game objects and tells everyone why this is just another setback.
My demise accomplishes nothing. The master will have you. You will drown in your own blood. The world shall burn.
So let's go back a bit before Kael'thas lost his way and whatnot, and illustrate how all of this plays a role on a much larger scale. Our list of events is of course much larger for a fight that takes close to half an hour, but the principles are more or less the same. There's a little event when you first aggro him. He becomes unattackable, says something, takes about 20 seconds to play out, then says another line before calling another script onto Thaldred. As you might have guessed, the script he calls on the Thaldred makes him attackable, before then aggroing the zone. When Thaldred dies, Kael's informed, and a script is then sent to Lord Sanguinar. And this follows through until the last one, Telonicus, dies. Now, when Telonicus dies, one of the larger sequences begins, and it starts with Kael summoning all of his weapons that you have to fight. There's a single spell for each weapon, which is what you're seeing happening after 11.5 seconds. And then there's a 2-minute pause before the next phase of the fight. Then there's a 3-minute pause, or 5 minutes since the start of the sequence, before the next phase begins when Kael himself enters the fight. This phase is more or less straightforward. The Phoenixes work the same as they do in Magister's Terrace, and if your raid can deal with the shield and Pyroblast sequence, the real fun doesn't begin until 50%. Now, when that event triggers, a very elaborate sequence begins. The first thing it does is instruct the boss to move to a point on his platform, and then to carry over another sequence once he arrives there. And this is the meat of the event that plays.
I have not come this far to be stopped. The future I have planned will not be jeopardized. Now you will take true power.
I'm not going to go over every little detail, but you should have the gist of what's going on in the giant list you see. It might seem a little complicated, but once you get the hang of making these kind of events, it really becomes quite quick and easy, which of course in turn makes it easier to debug. So that's all I'm going to talk about for this video. I realize I've talked quite a bit about the AI, so the next video I make will be a little bit different. Anyway, that's all for now, and take care, guys.